I'm talking to pathological liar Thomas L. Rogers. At least according to the what is this AMA? I mean, what isn't this AMA pretty well stock and controlled? Now, the pharmaceutical industry or the doctors don't make any money if you're healthy, do they?
That's exactly right.
And if by chance you live to be 75 instead of 65, that could cost Social Security, which they've already stolen from, a lot of money, couldn't it?
Well, yeah, that's right. You know, instead of being a contributor like we were, that's our money, for heck's sakes. I don't apologize for getting some of my money back. But see, their design, like the insurance company is you're going to croak before you can collect. And if we follow their prescriptions, we will croak before we get to collect. But see, 20 years ago, I blew their program, and instead of dying on that steel table 20 years ago like they intended me to do, you know, and the they is kind of a big word. It's actually ourself, because we're willing to accept ignorance. But I should have been dead 20 years ago, and in that case I would have collected none of my Social Security, and they could pocket that. But if you learn the truth, you will live longer, and that's not good for them. Not good for the bankers. Not good for the bureaucrats. Not good for the AMA, Jay Rockefeller, David Rockefeller, you know, all those boys. and right now they'd love to have me in the coffin. They tried to do that when I was in D.C. I went to D.C. December and January this last winter. Spent a month there trying to get this resolved through Congress. You know, I sat down with the staff and the senators of 83 Senate offices, 83 senators, 52 House of Representatives, and I sat down with the agencies that are all involved in this. And there was an attempt made on my life while I was there in D.C. See, if this is opened up and exposed to the public, they've got a real problem, because they've got 33 years of brain damage, illness and death that they've caused, and when the public comes to know that, they should be enraged, and they should be enraged anyway, because right now the government knows of this thing that I've opened up. I've testified before committees in D.C., committees in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which included the manufacturers. You know, and I've been to my legislature. There's not a soul in government that I haven't made an attempt to get this information to, so we can correct this problem and prevent the further damage and death to our generally humble, you know, more struggling families. And by the way, that is a focus on the black families. It's a focus on the Native American families. It's a focus on many of the ethnic immigrants that are here. I also found out another reason why they don't want this exposed is because if we go out to every manufactured mobile home in the United States, which are right now by default federal property, so no local authority has jurisdiction, if we go out to these units to look for a safety issue, a health issue, number one, you're going to figure out who owns the unit, and number two, you're going to figure out who's in it. And right now, the human trafficking industry cannot afford to have the mobile home and manufactured home housing units inspected, because then they will be uncovered as to the primary housing instrument of the undocumented folks coming across the Mexican border. So the drug cartels, the illicit businessmen, that includes Tyson, Purdue, and all these big packing industry boys, they'll be caught and exposed in their involvement in the human trafficking issue. So they've made threats on my life. They've done everything they could to wreck my credibility. That's why I'm a pathological liar now instead. Because they cannot afford to have anybody inspect every manufactured mobile home, because most of them, especially out here in the West, will be occupied by undocumented families. See, my heart goes out to these folks that have been hoodwinked. They've been recruited by American businessmen in their countries, and they've been promised the moon. They've been promised housing, jobs, medical care, even papers, even documents. And so they are told to contact the drug cartels to get their passport across the border. You know, they either are permitted to walk across and not shot in the back of the head, or they're trucked across if they're willing or to pay the price, or to contract for the rest of their life to the coyotes and the cartels. And then they deliver them, or they direct them to show up at the mobile home park that is owned by the packers or the industry that's willing to use them. And they're put in these mobile homes, and they're protected by the federal government in their housing, because HUD is the regulatory power over all manufactured mobile homes. So the states cannot go in there legally and evict these tenants, right? Well, they're not tenants, they're slaves. And if my issue is exposed and the public knows about it, and they start to worry about the safety issues in these mobile homes, they'll find out that most of the mobile homes, or a good portion of them, are housing undocumented people. And
so this is just, in essence, a repeat of what supposedly happened in Nazi Germany, where they herded the Jews into the gas chambers, and right. Now the government is encouraging these illegals to come over and work for Tyson. I mean, they got a bus line running between El Paso and Arkansas.
Yep.
And they're being housed in these units that are designed specifically to shorten the lifespan of the inhabitants.
Exactly. See, I don't know that they factored that in when Kissinger and the boys put this poisoning arrangement in. I don't think that they thought ahead about this problem that they would also create for their undocumented workers. But since HUD is the regulatory power, the manufactured mobile homes, especially since they can be purchased cheap and moved anywhere you want them, are the primary instrument of hiding and housing the undocumented. If everybody will watch the film Food Inc., in the last segment of that film, it shows the coyotes delivering these human, cargo, and of course the contraband that goes with them, the drugs and the pornography and all of the sex trade. It goes with them to the mobile homes there in Garden City, Kansas, and then they, that is the Mexicans or the Guatemalans or the Peruvians, whoever's coming there, then they are instructed to go from that mobile home park to Tyson, for example, or Springfield or Swift and Company, and they will be employed there. And what's sad, they were promised on the other side of the border that if they would come to America, that they would have a job, they would have medical care. Now, how do you give an undocumented person medical care? Well, you do it under the table. Now, if I'm a doctor and somebody comes to me and I got to deal with all the paperwork crap of Medicare and Medicaid, I say, oh crap, this costs me more than what I make. But if a representative of Tyson comes over there and says, I've got this Mexican worker, can you take care of his injury? He was injured in the packing plant, cut by a chainsaw or by a knife. The doctors say, oh, I'll do that, but I can't afford to do that under Medicare and Medicaid. So the Tyson representative will say, here's my Federal Reserve notes. Are they good enough? That doctor will be excited to treat this Mexican. because he's now going to be paid in cash. He doesn't have to present any paperwork, so that relieves him of all the reporting of that income, right? So he loves a Mexican injury. He loves an undocumented worker coming into his clinic, because that's money under the table. And that's what's been happening. See, people say, well, I hate these undocumented workers because they're taking our Medicare and our Medicaid. And I just say, BS. They're taking cash from the people who are benefiting from their labor. And the medical profession loves the undocumented because of that. Most people don't know that. But right now, I have my fellows trying to do everything they can to shut me up, because now they're being exposed in that little behavior. That they are being paid under the table, while the public is made to believe that the undocumented worker is the one draining the Medicaid and the Medicare funds, and that's nonsense. The public is being drained when you go to the meat counter and you pay the money for that piece of meat from these companies. Then your money is going into the hands of the company, and then the company pays the doctor. It's not Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security funding that's being depleted. It's your consumer dollars. Is that an eye-opener, I hope?
Yes. Now, have you tried taking this to mainstream news to do any will they do any reporting on this?
I've tried. I've had a few very courageous reporters do stories, and you know what's interesting? As soon as they do the story, they are removed. I've had every person that's helped me with any degree of integrity has been removed, fired, or blackballed out of politics. I had a dear friend, a relative, as a matter of fact, who everybody believed he was betraying them politically, but under the cover, he was able to do things that was helping me. When that was discovered, that he was literally turning against his fellowship in the bureaucracy and was trying to do things right and trying to create a problem for these human traffickers, right? They got rid of him. He was removed. He was removed by the Republican Party leadership. What does that tell you? If a man is actually doing right in this immigration issue, in the human trafficking issue, and then he's blackballed and removed from the party, what does that tell you about the party leadership?
Well, what does it tell you about a country that uses their BATF to deliver weapons to drug cartels in Mexico?
See, people complain, they say, we need a border patrol. No, we have a border patrol. It's the Zeta gang. It's the Gulf Coast gang. It's the Medellins, the Melinas, it's the Escobars.
Oh, we sent our special forces down to kill the Medellin cartel. We just replaced it with the banksters. It's called the Cali cartel now.
Right.
Now, you know, so, if I just shared this before the show, before you came on. I said if you live long enough, this is an article I just put out in an email out to everybody on my list, and if it's a correct answer. When you're asking the wrong question, you never get the right answer. You know, so the question is not who and what is Al Qaeda. The question is who hired them. If you live long enough, you see the same stories generation after generation. Credit manipulation causes depression and starvation, followed by weapons and war-based economic recovery. The names may change, but the situations and scams do not. From the French Revolution forward to today. And if you look hard enough, you discover that the people also running the world are not the familiar names you read in the newspapers. You also realize that stories about these famous names are really endless and irrelevant distractions for the more important question that needs to be asked. Who's responsible for all this confusion? All they talk about is peace and all we get is war. Is this a human paradigm? Why is nothing ever fixed in the world? It's because the real questions are never asked. The real criminals are never identified. And why are they never identified? Because the real criminals own the media. Every story you read is what the good guys they are, not about what colossal crimes they committed. And the same is very true about Americans who believe they're benevolent heroes when in reality, Americans have accounted for more unjust murders of innocent people than any other country in history, all in the name of freedom and democracy. How did this happen? And the answer is simple. You know, it is the people we've been taught not to mention in polite company control every aspect of our lives, and if we mention them in a derogatory manner, our lives are then destroyed economically, socially, and in other ways that are worse. Would you say that's accurate?
If I didn't say that was accurate, I would be lying.
Even the best reporters on the internet maintain the fiction that it is countries that actually run the world, when for at least last 100 years, those really in charge have been the international money lenders who've owned and ruled every king and president who's reigned in this period. But this is not reported on even by your best reporters, except for the Free American, who either know what they have to do to keep their jobs or they lose their jobs. I haven't ever had a job, so I guess I'm fairly safe.
my prayer is that we will wake up. And what's really wonderful, and this sounds funny that I would use the term wonderful in my battle, is God gave me an irrefutable situation. In other words, anybody with a brain, anybody with eyes, anybody with a tape measure, right, knows you don't put mankind 3 feet away from a toxic exhaust source and expect to find him healthy or even alive after a while. And in this process, and I think God had his finger in it, he's exposing not only this poisoning intent of these malfeasant players, but he's also exposing their profitable industry, the most profitable industry on the planet, human trafficking. And so I had no idea that when I went to this small community and discovered the cause of this family's baby's melees, near death, that I was also poking the stick into the evil hornet's nest of human traffic. And along with human traffic, of course, comes the evil that, you know, we call it the war on drugs. What a load of crap that is. They are literally providing the avenue for the drugs to come into America and destroy Americans with drugs, at the same time that they're bringing these poor folks in after, you know, brainwashing them on the other side of the border.
You know, 100 years ago, you could get opium, you could get heroin, you could get Dilaudid, you could get cocaine in your Coca-Colas, and we didn't have a drug problem.
Right. But since we're now back into prohibition, right, it is the gangsters that profit. You know, we create Al Capone by making alcohol illegal. We found out that wasn't too bright, so we went to the state-regulated liquor stores, you know, and I don't know if that was really a step forward, but at least it kept Al Capone from profiting from alcohol. Well, today we are doing the same thing. You know, you referred to marijuana. I'm not for, you know, encouraging marijuana anyway, but on the other hand, when you have marijuana illegal, you fill the jails with these really minor criminals, right? And the real criminals are scot-free out there making the money off of that whole process. That includes the judiciary. You know, I have the anger of the judiciary against me too, because I'm saying if you guys had any integrity, all of this crap would come to a halt.
I believe I just sent this out yesterday. Decriminalizing drugs, a good idea that probably won't happen. The war on drugs is a fiasco and a failure. Even the lie in the name is a lie. It is not a war on drugs, it's a war on the American people. This worrisome and wearisome war, if it is really to stop drugs, it is a catastrophe. With our porous, essentially unguarded borders, We either can't or won't stop illegal immigration, drugs, terrorists, or anything else. As far as controlling drugs once they enter the country, anyone who wants them, no matter where they are, can find them in a shockingly short time. So think about it. We can't even get drugs out of maximum security prisons, much less off the streets and out of our schools. And what's more, the drug war has filled our prisons with people who are not violent criminals, as you just pointed out, Thomas. For decades, the Latin American drug-producing nations have pointed out our insatiable national drug consumption and appetite, which is staggering. No one grows a crop unless they're consumers. This creates uncounted billions of dollars in other currencies in underground economies all over the world. In some countries, the drug trade is the #1 source of income. Some countries have oil, some have drugs, and there's a heavy demand for both.
Well, I'm going to refute you on that unprotected border statement. It's very well protected by the drug cartels. And if you do not pony their junk with you when you walk across that river or that desert, the bullet will be put in the back of your head. So they literally control that border, and you don't walk across without being party to their drug traffic.
Well, now, let me point out something else, because I've done a lot of research on this since almost 30 years ago. I got Colonel Edward P. Catolo's document about how he operated Operation Watchtower, which brought over 100 plane loads of cocaine in from Colombia to Albrook Air Force Base, where it was then shipped to a little airport called Mena, Arkansas. And our presidents were in charge of these operations, and the CIA and the Mossad were in charge of these operations. I think the CIA and the Mossad have basically taken over all the drug cartels and are the drug cartels, and they're using the illegals to carry it up here, ferry it up here, sell it in our neighborhoods.
See, in my state right now, they're pushing a bill through to e-verify every person that's employed. I said, well, that's a joke, because if you are, if you're brought over here by a coyote and you're given housing that's sanctuary, you don't need a freaking job. All you got to do is push the drugs and the pornography and the stuff that you're literally forced to be a pony for. So, they think, well, if we get every business to e-verify, make sure that the documents are correct for every employee, that they're going to stop this.
They've done the same thing. They did the same thing in San Francisco. They flooded the black communities there during the Vietnam War with heroin. And the blacks were killing themselves with the heroin, selling it to each other.
Yeah, that's the sad thing. And my heart goes out to my Latin brothers and sisters, because they are the victims in this malicious white man's crime. I'm going to call it that. The white man's crime against them. And everybody is made in the media to believe it's, that's these dirty Mexicans that are the problem. No, my friend, it's you, because you're so dang ignorant.
If I have made I've been accused of being a racist, anti-Semitic, and all that. If you talk about the Jews, control of the media, well, then you're anti-Semitic. And if you talk about the illegal situation, then you're supposed to be racist. But if I lived in Acapulco and I couldn't feed my family, I'd be walking up here with the Mexicans that are simply trying to find a job.
That's right. They have been seduced. They've been brainwashed. One of my sons was down in Central America. He saw it on the front end. He saw the American businessmen down there, their representatives, going to these people that already had been raped by IMF and NAFTA, losing their land, right, to these boogers, these American bankers, or these world bankers. So then they are approached and they said, well, if you'll just find your way to America, we'll give you a job and medical care, housing, and all of that. What would you do? If you're down there, your children are starving, you've lost your farm, I would be walking north. But then, of course, they've got to then deal with the Border Patrol, the true Border Patrol, the drug cartels. So they have to go into a contract, muster whatever money they can find, and or commit to the payment of money for the rest of their life to these monsters that are literally our own monsters, right? And so they're victims and we are victims, and the ones that come out shining are the Al Capone mentality of the banksters. They've created this whole disenfranchisement of people in their own land. Mexicans don't want to come to America. They want to live in their own land where their families and where their inheritance, their heritage is. But they are forced by the criminality of the banksters to come up here and become a problem even to themselves.
They did the same thing with the Pale settlement in Russia. They inflamed the Jews and drove them out in the Bolshevik Revolution. And the whole Otzelon movement is a mirror image of what was done to the 40 million, 60 million white Russians in Russia, white Christian Russians.
Yeah, you're talking about my relatives too now, and yours.
Yes. I mean, we fought 2 world wars. That was insane. We had white Christians fighting white Christians around the world, and I think 3 communist countries actually won the war, and I've been questioning who won the Cold War ever since it was supposedly
the bankers won.
That's who won.
The
they fund both sides. They don't care who wins. They don't care if Red China runs the world or Washington D.C. runs the world. They don't care, and you know that they've got their headquarters in Manhattan, they've got it in Brussels, they've got it in the city of London, and they got it in Hong Kong, you know, or they've got it in Beijing.
Well, I pray that all those that are listening will go to my website, licensetokill.us or poisoningthepoor.us. Either way will get you in there. Follow that through. You'll actually end up ultimately going to a website about this initial family with this poisoning. But you got to see the spider web of intrigue or corruption that's in this. And we, the people, are the only hope that we, the people, have when we start to be honest with each other and we turn off the ignorance and the lies that are dumped down our throat by these people who profit from our misery and profit from our death, profit from our drug addiction, profit from our food addiction. You know, it's really interesting that the primary industry that drives the human trafficking is the meatpacking industry. And the meatpacking industry, and I'm going to hurt everybody's feelings, is the primary cause of disease among us. So you need to get up to speed on what's real. You also need to do everything you can to protect your neighbor, and that includes your Mexican neighbor from this poisoning.
Now, my children grew up, and for 10 years, I lived on range-fed beef from my neighbor.
Uh-huh. That's a step up, but even range-fed beef is being poisoned because of the poisons in the environment. You know,
well, they're poisonous with the chemtrails are putting barium and aluminum in our water supply. That's increasing the aluminum that's already put in our water supply by our water departments. I mean, this is a very, very well planned weakening of America. What happened in the oil Gulf was an attack on our food supply, also, wasn't it?
By the way, I suggested to you that you get hold of Jesse Finneran, my now friend and brother in New Orleans. He's also been working on this Gulf Coast poisoning, you know, from
what was spell the last name for me?
Finneran. If you go on my website, licensetokill.us, you'll see a link over there to Jesse Finneran's work. You know, and he's still down there picking up tar balls and getting them analyzed. He's grateful to me, by the way, that I convinced him to get off of the animal foods because the fish, the sea life coming out of that Gulf is toxic. It's causing people to die.
We're out. The links are all up on our website. we're just about out of time here. Don't go away yet, but I got to sign off here on a couple of places. Hold on.
Call recording has been completed.